Hello everybody. Today I'm going to show you the process that I took to refinish my rusty refrigerator. As you can see in the before photo, there was a lot of rust on the bottom and there's also some on the sides. The refrigerator works great, I really like it, but I was sick of looking at how rusty it was, so I decided to film the process of me painting it with an epoxy that stops rust. The process was really easy, it took about an afternoon, and I'm really happy with how everything turned out. I'm using this can of Rust-Oleum Appliance Epoxy. It comes in gloss white and it says on the can that it stops rust, so that's exactly what I'm looking for. I grabbed it off Amazon. You can find the link in the description. It comes in a small can and it ended up being just enough, maybe just a little bit more than I needed for a full refrigerator. There's going to be 6 steps to this project. We're going to first remove the handles and the door plugs, then clean and sand, then a final cleaning. Next, a first coat, then a second coat, and then a final touch-up at the end. The first step is to remove the handles and the door plugs from your refrigerator. The handles came off pretty easily with a Phillips head screwdriver, and the door plugs I switched to a flathead screwdriver and pried them out. Make sure to look throughout the whole refrigerator to get all of those plugs. They hide them everywhere. Step 2 is to clean and sand the refrigerator. We're going to need a degreaser cleaner. I used dish soap. You'll need 150 grit sandpaper and then some general cleaning supplies. I'll be completely honest with you, this is the worst part of the entire project. It takes a lot of time and work to make sure that everything is clean and ready for painting. Just like any painting job, the bulk of the work is always in the prep, and this is no different. So we're tag teaming this right now, but the first thing you'll want to do is make sure you take a degreaser cleaner and clean the top and the sides of the refrigerator so that it's completely clean and there's no grime and there's no dirt. After it's clean, the instructions say to lightly sand the entire painting surface with sandpaper. So I used a 150 grit sandpaper and I wrapped it around a 2x4 to make it a little easier. Before starting the project, I considered using a rotary sander, but since I'm doing this inside, I figured it would make too much of a mess. In hindsight, I wish I would have used that rotary sander because my arms were sore after I finished doing this. It would have been a good idea to wear a mask because it was dusty and it probably wasn't very good to breathe it in. I should have taken the doors off the refrigerator and worked on them separately, maybe even outside. It would have been a lot easier. I could have been a lot more detailed in all of the nooks and crannies, and the whole process would have been a lot cleaner. The problem that I have is that the refrigerator is full of food and I have no place to store all of it. I don't have a big cooler I can put it into. I don't have another refrigerator, so I am going to attempt to do this whole project with the doors still on. Now looking back on it, I'm happy with how everything turned out. So it's not too big of a deal leaving the doors on, but if you have the luxury of being able to work on the refrigerator without having to worry about food, taking the doors off would be a lot easier. Step 3 is more cleaning. The dusting was really dusty, and I need to make sure that the refrigerator is totally spotless and clean and dirt-free before I paint. So I use some all-purpose cleaner, the same stuff you would use on your counters, and I sprayed down each side of the refrigerator and then wiped it down with a paper towel. Step 4 is the first coat. We're going to need the Rust-Oleum Appliance Epoxy. There's a link in the description for that. You'll need a paint roller, brush, and tray, some painter's tape, some cheap foam paint brushes for the hard-to-reach places, and something to stir the epoxy with. Before painting, I just put some painter's tape around the refrigerator hinges and a little bit on the floor next to where I was going to be painting. I also put down a drip cloth so that if I spilt any drips or had any drips, which I did, that they got on the cloth and not on the floor. And then from there, it's smooth sailing. A lot of the prep work was already done, so it's really just go through and paint the refrigerator. I'm going to wait until all of the paint is dry before I do the insides of the doors because I'm going to need to hold the door open in order to get to all the details, and it's going to be hard to hold the door open when it is wet. The can said to do a second coat 45 minutes later, so I set a timer after the first coat finished and came back and did a second coat. The first coat came out well, but it definitely needed a second coat. I ended up having some paint left in the can that I didn't want to hold on to or throw away, so I decided to paint one final coat on the front and on the side. It didn't need it, but like I said, just didn't know what else to do with the paint and figured it couldn't hurt just to do a final coat on the parts of the refrigerator that are going to be outward facing. The last thing I did was paint the insides of the doors, the parts of the refrigerator that touch when the refrigerator is closed. I didn't film this because I wasn't sure if I was going to do it at the time. It's hard to do this part while you're painting the outside because you need to touch the outside in order to really get around that whole inside section. But also logistically, I wasn't sure how to do this without closing the refrigerator doors, and I wasn't taking the doors off. I had a refrigerator full of food. After putting everything back together, it was really noticeable that this section wasn't done, so I decided to do it. So I just took a cheap foam paintbrush and painted around the insides, and I decided to prop the door open for a couple of hours. It's not the most energy efficient plan, but it's the only thing that I could think of. I had a thermometer in the top and in the bottom just to keep an eye on everything. Obviously, the temperature did go up when I was doing this. The doors were open, but it didn't go up too much and it didn't really cause any issues with any of the food. I only had the doors open for a couple hours. I closed them once the paint started to feel mostly dry. You may want to take off those ceiling gaskets. I left mine on because they're getting kind of old and I didn't want to take them off and have trouble getting them back on. They maybe could be replaced, but they're working fine now and they're insanely expensive, so I wanted to try to work around them if I could. And that is it. I put the handles back on, the door hole plugs back in, and slid the refrigerator back to where it normally belongs. The difference is night and day. It looked like an old hunk of metal before, and now it looks brand new after I did it. It even smells brand new, weirdly enough. It changed the way the whole kitchen looks. It only took an afternoon and like $30, so if you have the energy to do this, it's not too bad. I highly recommend it. Let me know if you do end up trying it, and let me know if you have any questions.